We were all wrong. Roll Q was the biggest mistake that Blizzard made with Overwatch, and myself, as well as everyone else who claimed it was the solution, has been proven wrong over time. Today's video, I'm going to tell you guys why Open Q is better, and before I get the comments of everyone saying, oh, you want 4 DPS in every game? You want all these things, these same talking points that are malarkey that get thrown out all the time as if there aren't modern solutions for these things. Before you come to that conclusion and write this off, just hear me out as to what the solutions are, and we can talk about why OpenQ was better today. I want to preface this video by saying I was one of the biggest role lock advocates in the game, but time has proven me wrong. My young, naive self thought that it was the answer, and it definitely has not made the game better. In fact, it's the last thing holding Overwatch as a brand back from reascending to being a top-tier title in the industry. Let's talk about this, guys. The biggest reason, we're going to go point by point here, that people wanted to go to Roll Q was really to start the GOATS meta. Let's talk about top down first, and then we'll get to the plat matches where people are saying, oh, well, I get 4 DPS in my game and I don't want to fill. We'll get to that. I promise there is a viable answer to that. But let's start with top down, okay? The GOATS meta was dominating the game. What was GOATS? 3-3, Lucio, Brig, Zen, Rhine, D.Va, Zarya, okay? Everybody said that in order to get rid of this comp, 2-2-2 was the way, and that's what needed to happen. And they were right. If you go to 2-2-2, those types of comps cannot be run anymore. However, there's a better solution to these things now that we've realized that have been an amazing addition to Overwatch that Marvel Rivals came out with first, that Overwatch took and implemented it and made it better. That is hero bans. If hero bans were implemented in that iteration of Overwatch, as well as the fact the current dev team actually balances the game more than once in a blue moon, GOATS comps and 3-3 comps actually get solved. Not to mention the current 2-tank limit in OpenQ for 6v6 that's in the game right now is a great format limitation, and that is as far as it needs to go. You cannot pick more than 3 tanks in 6v6 OpenQ right now, and despite the limited support that the mode gets from the developers, it is still the second most queued mode over Stadium, which has its own dedicated team, whilst the Marvel Rivals community and Marvel Rivals as a game took most of the 6v6 community to that game. Despite all of those things, the 6v6 mode now is still queued more than some of the alternative modes. This is not going to be a video about 5v5 or 6v6. I will give some opinions on that, but this is more so of OpenQ being better for both formats rather than just one. But let's continue. The 2-tank limit solves this problem. Hero bans. If you could ban Lucio or Brig, you could actually ban around the meta on top of this dev team being much better when it comes to active balance patches to solve that. So locking the roles in 2-2 is not necessary. What we learned after going to role lock was the following, okay? Well, now people don't queue tank as much. Granted, there were some patches, and there's a lot of people in the 6v6 community that are advocating for role lock, and they could not be making a bigger mistake. I've seen a lot of people talk about it. It is not the answer. The queue times would be unsustainable in a mode that already has a lower player population. It is not the answer. But people realize, and the devs realize, granted, they didn't balance double shield, bans would have solved it, and I'm sure the queue times would be better, but they realize that less people are queuing tank. So what are we going to do to solve this? Well, we're going to take the tank role, and we're going to remove a tank from the game, and we're going to go to 5v5. 5v5 is our answer. If it takes less tanks to start up a game, we can get people in a match faster, and that way the queue times aren't 10 to 15 minutes long for DPS and or support. That will solve our problem. But here is the conundrum of what role lock causes to have happen to the game that is insanely unhealthy and is an unending rabbit hole. You start to design the game around maintaining queue times instead of actually designing the game to be fair fun, and equal, which is what Overwatch 1 did so well. I see so many people saying when I complain about the super tanks, and you know what? Actually, we're gonna shelf this and we're gonna keep moving. This is the first example of Blizzard having to redesign their perfect design. What Overwatch 1 did so well, and they were the first game to ever figure this out in the hero shooter, is that they got supports, tanks, and DPS perfectly. There was a perfect power level between each role individually to where tanks were able to hold space but do a very fair amount of damage in hard carry. DPS felt very powerful, and supports, while healing a lot, also had an equal amount of damage potential. The time to kills in Overwatch compared to any other hero shooter in Overwatch 1 was outstanding. Good enough for it to win Game of the Year as the only shooter of the previous decade to do it. They nailed that formula. It was perfect. But the first inkling of role lock and the first change that came because of role lock, because of the queue times, this was the biggest argument for 5v5 in the 5v5 6v6 debate, was the benefit of queue times, okay? They designed tanks to be super tanks, okay? They limited the downtime and vulnerability the tanks had to compensate for the lack of a second tank. This destroyed the power dynamic of the game, which meant that there was always going to be one loser amongst the roles. And the first loser that came because of role lock actually was not the tank role, despite all the doom posting that tank players had at the start of Overwatch 2. If you remember correctly, the first role that lost were the supports. When support was first revealed in Overwatch 2 and 5v5 in the alphas and betas, and I remember it because I remember the streamer Discord freaking out. Support players, pro and streamers alike, were all averaging 10 deaths per 10. They were dying on cooldown, and no one wanted to play the role. This was a big problem because there wasn't an off tank to also help hold space and peel the supports to keep them alive. So what ended up happening to the supports? Every support ability then got giga buffed on top of the fact they got a really strong role passive. Well, while the supports got better and stronger, what happened to the rest of the game? The DPS were still alright, because what ended up getting focus fired the most? The tanks. This is what led to the tanking crisis in 5v5, where everybody remembers the doom posting, how everybody said tanking was miserable. I know Flats had a bunch of videos on it, Boger talked about it. Nobody was having fun playing tank in 5v5, and that was because the tanks that were previously bulldozing the supports now had no option to bulldoze, and there wasn't a meaningful tank exchange on the front line because of role lock going to single tanks. The tanks got buffed so much, all they could do is trade with each other, while two supports that had giga buff cooldowns now, BAP shift burst healing, drone getting better, Kiriko Suzu in the game. You can go down the list of supports. On a Sleep Dart getting a massive cooldown reduction. They buffed every support ability, but with only one tank receiving that resource dump, it caused the tanks to endlessly trade out, making a stalemate and a gameplay loop that wasn't nearly as dynamic as even open queue, when those supports did not have to get giga buffed to sustain themselves in 5v5 role lock, or role lock really in any format, but especially in 5v5, which was caused again by the lack of tank players because they had to redesign for queue times, okay? So where did that leave us? What Blizzard ended up having to do was not only buff the tanks, but supports and their damage got buffed so much that in Season 8 of Overwatch 2, the DPS queue times at top 500 went down to 2 minutes, and the support queue times were 15. They had to buff everything so much that DPS could no longer secure kills on people. Again, what do you do to answer that? That's when they went to Season 9, made the tanks super tanks, and again, that did help queue times a bit, but now you're looking at the same type of queue times that you were before, because everybody who was playing off tank and trying to enjoy off tank quit playing tank because it wasn't as fun, so you didn't really gain that much. But now you're stuck in a game where in role lock, and this would be true in both 5v5 and 6v6, but it's particularly more true in 5v5, you now have tanks that are so strong, even if they make a mistake, they can't die. Let me go to the next argument here. I see this on X all the time where somebody tweets me and said, well, what do you want tanks to do? Just fall over? Why should you as a DPS be able to kill a tank? Well, here's why. Blizzard was the first company to get tanks right, in that tanks were very good at holding space, but they still had equal levels of damage, right? They still were able to be damage threats consistently. Take a design like Zarya, for example. She leans way more heavily into the damage side of things, so she can't hold space as well as a Reinhardt or even a Winston. Her trade-off for sacrificing that mobility, an ability to actually anchor space, was her damage. She has some of the highest damage outputs in the game, and she was 400 HP with only one bubble. But what happens when you give that Zarya the ability to bubble herself twice, good mobility cooldowns on top of like with the perks and stuff that she has, as well as better damage and survivability. You get a raid boss, right? Tanks were killable, but had trade-offs to where if they're going to be good at holding space, they lost damage. If the tanks do better damage than the DPS do, and they take better space than the DPS do, what does the DPS role serve? What purpose does it serve? You can't hard carry on the role like you used to because you're not the best damage dealer because the tanks also hold the space. That would be like if a Tracer player said, I want to be able to hold space like a Reinhardt and do the same level of damage as I do now. Why should the tanks be able to do more damage whilst being way tankier than the DPS? What role does the DPS role serve at that point? And the answer is none. For example, right now, you have way less carry potential on DPS in 5v5 than in 5v5 role lock than in any other role, because to compensate, imagine this exchange. One, you never win as a DPS against a tank. If you have a support pocket and the tank has a support pocket, you will never win. You can't win that fight. So if I get the benefit of 5v5 and I get an off angle and I go duel somebody on an off angle as a DPS and I win, but my super tank loses to their super tank and he trolls, and I come back into the fight, in 5v5 role lock, if that tank is alive with the support and I'm alive with the support, I have no playmaking ability because that tank has so much sustain on its own at its base kit now, on top of damage, that I cannot make a play against it. The big end loser in 5v5 role lock ended up being the DPS role. And Blizzard's okay with that because, again, it's not being balanced in order to be fair. It's being balanced to maintain queue times. And DPS was once the most queued role. So the game is now being designed in a manner to actually maintain queue times instead of have a diverse, super in-depth gameplay loop where each role can have equal impact on the game. This is a big, big design problem that's caused them to shift away from the core values of what made Overwatch 1 brilliant. And they have not been able to bring that back and will not be able to bring that back within role lock. It's a huge, huge problem. And 6v6 open queue has proven this. That is why, despite it not getting any support from the devs, it's the least supported mode in the entire game, it still has more players than Stadium. It still has more players in the Stadium, and it suffers when a video separate from this, I'm going to talk about this. A lot of the characters got reworked for 5v5 that need specific balance tuning for 6v6, and it can't get it because the resources are going to 5v5 role lock or Stadium, who have their own dedicated team. But I have another video talking about this coming out soon. But let's go back to the second point here. Now, we'll circle back to the gameplay loop in a minute. But Sam, I get 4 DPS on my team in open queue, and the game's instantly over and lost. There are 3 things that are out right now that prove that this can be solved. Number 1, Marvel Rivals. Marvel Rivals is doing 6v6 open queue with bans, and their matchmaker behind the scenes checks a player's playtime to see what roles they have played the most and tries to match those players on the back end automatically into a game. The matchmaker can do this without actually forcing people into a role. That can happen right now. Marvel Rivals has proven that it can be done. Is Marvel Rivals queues perfect? No, but there's no such thing as a perfect queue. Here is my second example. Okay, you get 4 DPS on your team, 3 DPS on your team, solo tank, okay? Many of those games are winnable. There were plenty of viable triple DPS comps that got value, especially with a 2-tank limit. Especially with a 2-tank limit in the open queue format. There were plenty of times where triple DPS comps were good. And a lot of the maps where stuffing corners and chokes were a big problem. You needed 2 tanks to get through them. Anubis. You could say Havana, which has not been reworked properly in my opinion, but that's another example. Those are map problems. Those are map issues, okay? A lot of those can be fixed with map design. On top of that, with a lot of the flanker DPS and new DPS options, if tanks actually had their health pools drop down to what they are in 6v6 right now, where tanks are killable, where despite what people say, oh, imagine how annoying Orisa and Malga would be together, when they're terrible picks. If you play 6v6 open queue or any open queue for more than 5 minutes, you realize how killable every tank is, and how those oppressive synergies can not only be completely mitigated by bans, you can kill each of those tanks not only as a DPS, but also as a support. On a headshot perk, the nades actually matter. The Suzu can't just go out on one super tank and the fight's over. The Kiri has to pick between each target. The fight dynamics are completely different, and playmaking is possible when the tanks have squishier health pools. It is so doable. And the matchmaker can help match players by selecting their preferred role before they queue, as well as checking their playtime and try to match these players together. So to the person saying, oh, well, my game is auto-lost because I have 3 DPS on my team and I don't want to fill. Well, guess what? It's auto-lost in 5v5 as well. When your tank, your raid boss tank, picks an inoptimal matchup, if you're playing DPS, you can't overcome that matchup, because in order to make people want to play tank and have fun on the role, they had to buff it so much that it's worth more than 2 DPS. And now every role has the heal mit passive as well. So the DPS don't even have that unique thing to them. DPS role lost so much in role lock, and because the end result was 5v5 with super tanks. If your super tank is bad right now, the game is over, because at least before, or in open queue, when it wasn't a raid boss, you had a chance to kill that player. It's that exact example that I gave, where if I win a DPS duel on the left and my super tank loses the frontline fight, if we both come back to the fight, it should be even. I should have every much of a chance to win that fight for my team, as their tank does. He should not have an inherent advantage over me because he has picked tank and I have picked DPS. But because of 5v5 roll lock and because of roll lock as a whole, I don't even want to single in on 5v5 here, because if 5v5 went to open queue, this problem would also be mitigated. This is not just a 5v5 6v6 issue. This is a roll lock issue. Roll lock destroyed the integrity of the game. It destroyed it. Hawk was right. You can't fix it. Open queue with bans and limit 2 tanks is the way. You can mitigate the 4 DPS in the game with matchmaking. You can do that. You cannot solve player behavior issues with formatting. It's impossible, because even if you get the right comp, there could, like a 1-2-2 comp, like 5v5 roll lock right now, your tank can still troll. This is what people warned us about when going to roll lock, that you can't ever solve that. And they were right. They were right. That's like being a vegetarian at a barbecue. It ain't gonna work. It doesn't matter what you do. You're not eating the steak. It's gone. There's no veggies here. It's all steak, brisket, you name it. You're a vegetarian at a barbecue. It's Jover. You can't do anything. Your job from a formatting perspective is to give both teams an equal tool set to go in and win the game, and let how they play decide the match. But in roll lock, that has never been the case. They have to design and balance the game to maintain queue times instead of actually making it a fair game, and it destroyed their perfect formula that Marvel Rivals stole like they were the freaking chum bucket from the Krusty Krab, and went out, even with sloppy balance, support ults up every 30 seconds, insane sustain abilities way out of this world, were still able to make the first successful hero shooter release because they stole the formula, made it worse, but it was close enough to the original that it was able to work alongside the Marvel IP. And it wasn't just the Marvel IP, because there were a ton of other Marvel games that came out that were terrible and flopped before this. It was the recipe they used. They copied the Krabby Patty, used worse sauce, and made it. And yet, even right now, that secret recipe, the Krabby Patty recipe, is sitting in the back of the kitchen while Mr. Krabs doesn't want to cook the Krabby Patties. He wants to make Krusty Krab pizza, which is 5v5 roll lock, and somehow, someway, that Krusty Krab, the Krabby Patty, baby, is still the second most selling thing on the menu, despite the new innovative thing that they're trying to put out that redefines the Krusty Krab. Screw that, dude. It's time to go back to the roots. It's time to go back to 6v6 open queue. It is the way, bro. It is the way. It works. What else do you need to see? And even then, even if the doubters and dissenters, who I used to be one of them, I've switched sides because I've gotten proven wrong, okay? Even if they were right, which they aren't, it still wouldn't matter, because everything that this game does to go back to the original game is received in such good PR that it would make the game more popular anyway. Because everything Overwatch 2 is unsalvageable to the average gaming consumer. You can't do it. Look at this release they just did. This was the best release that Blizzard ever did. And it's not Doom posting. I was the first streamer to say, drop the 2. It's useless. Doomer. Hate this guy. All he does is negatively post about the game. He's grifting for views. You name it. And then what happens? Marvel Rivals comes out and kills it. Overwatch reverts and copies. They get better. They drop the biggest update. They drop the 2, and the game is back. It's back. Overwatch is back because they did all of those things. And now here we are debating on whether or not the formula that won this game, Game of the Year, is the right formula for the game. What are we doing? What are we doing? You know, like, what are we doing? Marvel Rivals came out and proved it. They proved it with a worse game at its core. What else do we need to see? So this goes out to everybody who is coping. Oh, I don't want 3 DPS on my team. Well, yeah, I don't want a super tank Roadhog one trick who's going to sit there, freaking fart in his take a breather, and then huff it all game and go James Bond 007. Well, they have a Malga, and he won't switch. And that Malga is so tanky that no matter how well I play, I could be Jesus Christ reincarnated. I can't kill him because I drew the short straw because of roll lock. Blizzard can't nerf the supports because they sell all the skins in a free-to-play game. I get it. Shout out Kiriko, the new face of Overwatch. We can make a video talking about that. Kiriko is the face of the game. Sorry, Tracers. Sorry, Mercy players. It's Kiriko. Get over it. Reality hits hard. And they can't nerf tanks because nobody will queue the damn roll if the roll is not the strongest thing. Literally freaking like Hercules running down mid. Boom, 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 boom. Freaking prime Mike Tyson, okay? Or prime Muhammad Ali. Boom, boom, boom. Like unlosable. You can't kill it. So I just have to sit there like a submissive DPS player, get my ass beat by players I'm better than. Because I have to draw the short straw because someone has to lose in roll lock. It's unsalvageable, man. Let it go. Let it go. You're a vegetarian at a barbecue trying to make roll lock work. It will never work. I just got heated, dude. I'm sweating. I haven't gotten that heat about Overwatch in a long time, but I can taste it, bro. I can taste how good this game could be, how perfect the original formula was, and how the only thing we actually needed back then were hero bans. How good the hero ban system is in Overwatch now. How good the map voting system is in Overwatch. They're teasing me. They're teasing me with just about peak, okay? And I'm an addict. I'm addicted. I can't quit, okay? Like, Overwatch hits like crack. It's the best game engine to ever come out for a shooter. It's got the best aesthetics. If they just get the intangibles right, it can reclaim its throne. It can. It's so close. It's just got to try its original formula again and improve upon it with the preferred role queue. Have the matchmaker do that behind the scenes. The new characters are fire. Start telling the story again. Bring Talon back in. Get the Netflix show. And don't get it canceled because Bobby Kotick poaches the CFO from Netflix and then they get butthurt in their C-suite squabbling match that nobody cares about. All right? I'm just going to say that. And I'll leave it there. What do you guys think? Am I right or am I wrong? I think that I was wrong about roll lock. It is not the answer. It has not solved the game's problems. In fact, it's made it worse. It's made it harder for them. And the queue times are not better. They're just not. They're just not. 6v6 open queue is the way, or even 5v5 open queue would also benefit from this. So, oh man, you guys tell me. Thanks for watching. I'll see y'all next time. Take care. Much love. Peace out.